Alrighty. Right. Great to connect with you tonight. Looking forward to spending some time with you tonight. Uh, we've just got a minute left or so before we start. So actually, we're on time now. So if anybody is already subscribed to the channel, you can use the chat, and that would be great. If somebody is already on there, that they can just let me know that you can hear me all okay, and that would be brilliant before I kind of get into this and start ranting away. Well, let's make a start, and hopefully you can all hear me all right. Hopefully you can see my slides too, and we'll get into it. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. Thanks so much for connecting. Great pleasure to be with you today, and hopefully the topic has sparked some interest. Hopefully it's going to be useful for you. I think that this is particularly relevant if you've got some specific needs at the moment. So, my name's Steve Ingham. I'm a performance scientist, and I've been working in an elite sport since 1996. And I'm not going to bore you with my introduction. I've got some resources for you to have a look at if you want some further information. But in a nutshell, I try and create some content to help sports performance professionals thrive and get results for their career. I think I see too many people out there on their own suffering a little bit and not really necessarily getting to that place where people are thriving and getting good results for themselves. If you're interested in more content, I'm going to flag that for you in a moment. And but if there is a chance for you, if you want to connect with me today, I'm going to speak for about maybe 30 minutes or so, and then I'm going to take any questions. So we'll see if we've got any questions coming in. If you post those questions in the chat, then what that'll allow me to do is see if there's any at the end, and we can get into those. If that's about this particular topic or broader working in sports performance, then I'm very happy to field those. If you want some more content, you can go to our website and you can have a look at the Sporting Champions podcast. Take a listen to that on all the various platforms. There's a series of blogs and articles. I put a blog out every week and articles to try and help you work. And then How to Support Champion, which Supporting Champions is kind of been born by. That will give you an indication about me, but also probably about how I've developed through my career. Like I say, I'm not going to necessarily kind of get into, should you do a PhD tonight? Is that going to advance your career? What you might want to study if you're doing a study that's sort of relevant to sports performance, but you want to work in sports performance, but you've got a PhD in health or something. If you've got any questions like that, save them and ask me at the end, but I'm not going to be kind of getting into that. In addition to online content that you can access, there's a community of practitioners that I will create and store all of our webinars and how-to guides. And this video in 10 days' time will sit in the community alongside a how-to guide. If people are interested in that, we've got a bit of an offer on our courses at the moment, which you can get community access for free. It's sort of a June graduation sort of focus, and that's why I'm creating content around this PhD. So there's a big chunk of percentage off our courses at the moment. So if anyone's interested in those, I'm not going to overly sell those to you, but if you're interested already, use the code GradChamp, and that will save you a load of money, and you'll be able to, again, network in our community, learn about how you go about delivering for sports performance athletes, but equally connect and network in a community. So what's this session for? Look, let's just say to start off with, what I'm not going to provide you with is some hack, some system that makes it so much easier. Ultimately, a PhD is a big commitment, and it is a lot of work, and it is a lot of work over a long period of time. And if you're here because you think, I just want to get the speedy boarding pass to completion, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to offer that for you. What I will offer you, though, is ideas about effectiveness, efficiency, how you can be industrious and create momentum for yourself. It will require, though, persistence and, I think, professionalism. I think professionalism potentially is quite lacking in a lot of PhD students. And so you almost still feel like a student, when actually, if you view it as a professional and you apply professional practice to solving the problem of this long, arduous goal for a lot of people. So structure and a process, and I will give you some coaching points that I think, and I know because I've done it, can advance the rate at which you go through the necessary steps, and that should add up to being able to complete it part-time while working in a field that is relevant to your studies in under 3 years. That's my idea. And okay, not every one of the things that I'm going to suggest to you today you might be able to do. And so you might need to add a little bit more time on. And this is not for everybody. If you don't want to do this in 3 years, that's fine. But hopefully, there'll be a few ideas that you can cherry pick, adapt, tweak, evolve, and you can make this your own. So if you're currently doing a PhD full-time, congratulations on getting that role. And this might help you in that process. If you're currently doing a PhD part-time or spare time, for me it was spare time. I had 1 day a month to do my PhD whilst I was working. If you're aiming to do a PhD, as in that is in my goals, or you're thinking about it, you're considering it, but perhaps you might be thinking that idea and that prospect of that long process of study, I've just had enough of study and I don't know whether I can take that on, and you're feeling a little bit stifled at the moment. Any of the above, but actually you want to just be a bit more effective, and for this not to get out of hand for you as a goal. Some bad reasons that you should not do a PhD in under 3 years. If you're only interested in the title, I want to call myself Dr. Steve. If you're interested in completion more than quality, so I just want to get across the finish line, when actually a PhD should be, and this is a big point for tonight, is about enabling you to give space to providing quality in your writing and thesis. If you're interested in just the minimum effort route, this is not necessarily less effort. This is more effective effort. And equally, if you think, I want to do my PhD in 3 years, but I'm prepared for personal cost for that to put pressure on myself and cause burnout. There's not good reasons for you to chase this goal of less than 3 years. So in context, I did my PhD, what started back in 2000 and I finished in 2003. And so I did that in under 3 years. I did that whilst working at the British Olympic Association, and they paid for my PhD to be studied part-time, and that was part-time but really spare time. So 1 day a month I had study leave, and I would use that either to study at home, or I would use that to meet with my supervisors. So I was 4 years after I had graduated from my undergraduate before I started. I'd probably sort of warmed the ideas up a long time before that. And as I was graduating from my undergraduate, I thought I'd really love to do a PhD. In actual fact, because I wanted to work in sports performance, at that time, back in the mid-90s, it was the only route that you could. There wasn't really a profession there for professional sports scientists. And so what I saw a lot of people doing was having a PhD teaching and doing the sports performance stuff on the side. And so I sort of saw that as the potential route and came out of my undergraduate studies and applied for a lot of PhDs. That was back in the day when you didn't necessarily need a master's. So I wanted to do one. I wanted to do one because I saw that it was actually the route to getting work in this area. But there are 4 key reasons as to why I actually wanted to do one, and I actually committed to doing that whilst I was working. One, it was a backup plan. The first idea was that I didn't know whether I was going to have a full career, 20, 30 years plus or so in elite sport. So I saw it as potentially as a bit of a backup that I might be able to fall back onto as a PhD as a qualification really for professing or teaching. The second was that I had genuine interest in developing research. I wanted to research. I enjoyed that research process. And with sort of 3 to 4 years in the field with applied questions, I wanted to explore some of those questions in a niche way. And I spotted, and I think this is increasingly relevant for applied practitioners, is that I could see that those research skills were more advanced than the ones that I was using perhaps in situ with athletes. And that made me think I could maybe scrutinize and address performance questions at a higher level if I had those research skills. And the last one, I've got to be completely honest with you, maybe I'm being too honest here, is I could see there was a credibility issue. I could see people, maybe it was an age and stage. I was, 24 when I started working with Olympic athletes. To be sort of thinking, oh, we'll ask the 24-year-old or we'll ask the professor. There was maybe a stage and age thing there. But equally, I think I was probably going, if I said I don't know as Mr. Steve Ingham, people go, he doesn't know. If I said I don't know, Dr. Steve Ingham doesn't know. Gosh, it must be an interesting, innovative question that we're asking. I could definitely see a bit of a shift there, that there was enhanced credibility with that research degree. Possibly you don't need that now nearly as much. It was definitely playing in my head. My first tip for us to kind of get going here is that if you're going to make space for your PhD on a part-time basis and to study in a way that means that you can do this part-time, spare time, and work, I think you need to be careful about how many goals you take on. So I typically have about 4 or 5 goals at any one time that I'm working on, whether it's a fitness-based one, learning a language, for example, or a DIY project. And I know that I would pair those back if I was really wanting to move the needle on something. And so this is one of the particular tips I think that could really help you, is be careful about how many things you're taking on. The process I'll share with you tonight I used for my PhD, but I also used it for writing How to Support Champion. I actually wrote that in about 60 days. I'll share with you the process of writing that. So trimming your goals. If your PhD is a priority, then make it a priority. There is a misnomer of the word priorities. Prior means singular focus. And so if you've got several of those, it doesn't really make sense. So make it a proper priority and really focus on achieving that. Limit ambitions in other areas. And what I think this does more than anything is it creates capacity for you to create momentum so that you can keep moving, but also rather than just thinking, right, that's that PhD work done, now I've got to go and focus on doing something else, it can potentially give you a chance to rest and recover. So limit the amount of things that you're taking on at a given time. I think that can really help you, just making sure I can work on this bit for a sustained period of time. The second tip, and I recognise that this isn't necessarily going to be practical for everybody, but this would certainly help you. If you're working in an applied role, if you're working in a sporting setting, if you can try and find ways of integrating your research and your research question into your work, then that means that the Venn diagram is huge, is an overlap. So the way I did this was that I was working with the British rowing team at the time. And so what I did was they were coming in for laboratory-based testing, and I would add on extra tests to complete one of the studies that I was working on. I had a backlog of data that I could data mine and do an analysis on. That meant that I was addressing those questions in situ. Now, that's not always practical for everyone, I recognise that, so I was fortunate in that way. But find something that you can research in your work. And that might be about relationships, that might be about practice, that might be surveys that you can put out there. But it means that you've got a little bit of extra time and space and contribution to your work. If you can then find data collection opportunities that you don't need to organise or that you can piggyback on. So it could be that somebody's already creating an initiative. There's a project already flying, and tagging on some additional data collection or being able to collaborate or look at that data in different ways, that can certainly help you. I have to admit, my first draft of all the studies that I wanted to do were all fresh studies, when actually I didn't really know what was truly important for rowing performance. And so I ended up constructing this PhD question that would collect a whole swathe of data. And then someone said, well, look, there was a load in the lab, in the filing cabinets there, so why don't you go through that? And so it was certainly a huge amount of work, taking sort of 2,000 profiles down to 40 key profiles, I think it was, in that initial study. But it meant I didn't have to do the data collection. It meant that it was there. And what I'm suggesting is that if you can find ways of piggybacking on already existing work, that will advance the time available you have. The other one is to identify a question your employer is interested in. And so that could be that just listening differently for research questions that you can switch onto. Think, that's interesting. Okay, could I take some responsibility for that? Could I do some research on that and actually build it into your work? Because if you've got an employer that is sponsoring and backing that research and potentially funding it, if you can get that sort of backing, but if they recognise, that is moving us forward, that is advancing us, it needn't be their top priority questions. It could be 5th or 6th or 8th or 10th, but they know that it's a priority. If they're interested in it, then it means that permission to do that work in work is enhanced. Right, my next tip is to set the boundaries of your PhD. And so this is about just thinking, okay, what does it take to actually do a PhD? And setting some clear boundaries of which you're not necessarily stepping over or undercooking. So, being clear and talking this through with your supervisors, what is enough? What is enough? And that could be set at the experimental design. It could be once you've got your results in. It could be that you actually need additional studies. My example was that I set out to do 5 studies, but I pushed my supervisors to say, look, actually, I'm not sure we need that 5th one. These 2 in the middle are huge studies. So do I need that 5th one? Is this enough? And what I'm not doing is thinking about shortcutting, is that what that allowed me to do was focus on getting the quality right for those 4, rather than me stretching myself too thin and addressing something that perhaps was not a distraction, but wasn't necessarily within the bounds of that PhD. I actually went on to publish it. Camera change there, excuse me. So you don't get a PhD plus. You don't get a sort of, you might get one that doesn't need corrections necessarily, but actually, really, you're thinking about, you just want to do the PhD. You want to get the qualification. It's not. You don't get extra points for doing 2 PhDs necessarily. So set the boundaries of your PhD. Kind of be clear. What is it that I need to do to complete this? And keep that question in the back of your mind when you're having those conversations with your supervisors. The next one is about coaching your supervisors. And so this is about kind of thinking about the relationship that you have with your supervisors and not necessarily getting too waylaid by being the student. So my first tip is consider trying to sort of evolve and move on from the student-teacher relationship. Because when you're at that sort of postgraduate level, you're really beyond that student where, okay, just tell me what I need to do, give me the knowledge. You're discovering it. You're the expert in this now. And so really try and think about this as being a partnership for you and your supervisors. This is going to be dependent on your supervisors being supportive, open-minded, leaders. But a partnership is perhaps where you need to be thinking. And I would be selecting my supervisors quite carefully. If you've got the choice, choose your supervisors carefully. But ultimately, you're going to be in a situation where you've got to co-create direction, focus, content, study design, writing style. And so my conclusion here really is about, look, if you have to do the work, you should probably be deciding on what you're doing. And so this is about you taking much more ownership, being on the front foot, being prepared at different times to perhaps challenge back rather than just thinking, oh, the supervisor wants me to do this, I'll do that, or do whatever they say. You'll see this in sort of reviewer 1, reviewer 2 comments when you publish something, and you'll see that reviewer 1 wants you to change that table, and reviewer 2 loves that table. Reviewer 2 tells you to get rid of that figure, but reviewer 1 wants you to keep that figure in. And so you've got to kind of manage sort of supervision inputs, and you've got to decide. You've got to ultimately take ownership for this. So I push back on my supervisors a couple of times, say, do I really need to be doing that? Or I like this direction because it offers me more tangible benefit to the team that I'm working with. And that mechanistic thing that you want to look at, I'm not really sure that's relevant for my PhD. Equally, I got pushback too. I got pushback from my supervisors. I'll give you an example in a moment about, okay, Steve, you can go through this. You can go through this way you want, but here are the risks. And they were able to coach me along. I think perhaps of all the tips I've given you so far, I think probably this one is the biggest. The biggest in terms of reducing down the volume of work that you actually do. And this is all about you creating and sustaining momentum. This is about getting the flywheel moving, and for that flywheel to keep moving during that 3-year period. So what do I mean by that? My first tip is to write every day. And I genuinely mean this. Write every day. If you can, then it could just be one word. If you're thinking, it's Christmas Day, am I really going to open my laptop? It's one word. Bang, it's done, close the laptop. But there's a sense and a feeling mentally for you to be moving the pages and the words down. So quick sums, about 60,000 is kind of what you'd expect for a science-based PhD. If you divide that by 365 days, that's 165 words per day. And when I sort of sat down and looked at this and thought, okay, how much have I got to write for this thing? Okay, 165 words, I could write that every day, definitely. And now I'm starting to set some goals about writing every day. And I didn't always write 165 words per day. I didn't write every day, but I had a goal of writing every day. Some days I wrote 2,000 words. Some days I wrote just one word. But it was just enough each time. The one thing I'd also recognise, and you know, there's a great video on this from Ed Sheeran, actually. He calls it the first shitty draft. And this is about getting the words down and realising it's probably going to be a bit rubbish to start off with. Get the words down. There will be times where you're really trying to get really good focus on exactly the right word, and it's going to take ages to construct that single sentence. There will be times when you're trying to refine, but actually getting the volume down, it's far, far easier to review content than it is to get it down. And so if you try and lower the inhibitions and just get it written, and then you can come back to it. I reckon my PhD took about 30 to 50 iterations, so drafts. So every section had about that number. And so, you know, if I set goals like setting 250 words per day, which is not unmanageable, for 3 years, that's 273,000 words that I'd need to write. I don't need to write that many, but that's the number of words I might be reviewing. So reviewing 250 words is much easier than writing a fresh 250 words. So you can start to see that writing every day can create a real rich streak of a habit. I reckon about 30 minutes. So you're allowing yourself about 30 minutes. And so I had a tactic for this. I would arrive at work early to miss the London traffic. I would sit in my car and I would write. And I would write before I go into work. Before I go into work, because I knew if I went in, I'd get distractions. Even if it was at 6:30 in the morning, I'd sit down, I'd write. I've minimised the rush hour traffic. I've minimised the distractions. I can just focus in my car and write on my laptop. So planning potentially or working ahead for days when you can't. So it could be that I think, okay, I'm I'm not going to work on Christmas Day, so I'm going to write 500 words on Christmas Eve, or the 750 words the day before. And that might be my goal. And mentally, I'm now thinking, okay, I've done the work for those days. And so if you get into that habit of being able to have hot bursts of work that can sort of give you a bit of a break if you need it. This is my top tip, though. Perhaps this is the most productive tip that I've used during my PhD and writing How to Support Champion and the first hurdle is, if you've got 30 minutes, stop at 25 minutes. You might get better at this. You might only need 2 minutes. So you might stop at 28 minutes and allow yourself 2 to 5 minutes where simply you are noting down what you're going to pick up next. Because if you don't, there's always a lag of 5-10 minutes of what was I thinking? What was I writing? Where was the bit that I picked up last? I highlight the section in yellow and I'll keep the Word document open, obviously saved and backed up, but I'll keep it open, that yellow bit, and it's staring at me. That's the bit. That was what you were thinking about last time, and this is what you were going to write about next time, rather than me thinking, oh, I'll just go and review something else, or where do I need to pick up? What is it I need to read next? And having to do that lag-based work every time. The amount of time that you can save by doing that is huge. So that's my golden kind of top tip nugget. Last couple of thoughts, and I'll ask you if you've got any particular questions. I'll boot that up in a moment, and you get typing now, so I'll see it in time because there's always a delay for live streaming. So final thoughts. Choose something you're interested in. That makes it so much easier and so much more engaging. You don't have to do the work of thinking, oh, I've got to graft at this now. Choose your supervisors wisely, because if you can choose those wisely, then what you're going to get is you're going to get people that constructively support you along the journey. It's going to be a partnership. It's going to be a to and fro. They're going to support you along the way. My supervisors, Joe Doust, Helen Carter, they were brilliant at supporting me through my PhD. They definitely challenged me. Joe, I thought I'd finished writing after 2 years and 6 months, so 2.5 years. And Joe, my director of studies, said to me, Steve, you've completed your thesis. Congratulations. You've now got a choice. You've got a choice of either spending another 6 months to refine and develop and having an easy viva, or you submit now and you've potentially got a tough viva ahead. Which one do you think you might choose? And I was like, okay, I'm going to put another 6 months to this. And I got it done in 5 months or so and submitted. So that's a good example of where really you need to be thinking constructively about the people that are supporting you. Get reviews and critique early, and that's perhaps regularly, and that's part of you seeking advice, seeking support. You have to be an active partner. You can't just expect people to put it on a plate for you. And my bugbear, this has got nothing to do with PhD completion, but because we're talking about PhDs, I'm going to say it anyway, because it really grates on me, is don't claim it twice. Once you've finished your PhD, Dr. Steve Ingham PhD, no, I didn't do 2 PhDs, I did 1. So choose where it goes. My preference is Steve Ingham PhD. Dr. Steve Ingham's fine, but not Dr. Steve Ingham PhD. My final thought for you today is, of all of these concepts and all of these ideas, there requires a level of persistence and meticulous discipline to be able to do it. I didn't say this was going to be easy tonight. I said that this would help you be efficient. And so the P potentially in PhD is for persistence. And that's a quote from my supervisor, Helen Carter. She said this to me and it kept me moving. Because when I was thinking, I'm not smart enough for this bit, or I'm finding this bit tricky, or I'm struggling to get the momentum and the motivation for this, I thought, you know what? It's about me being persistent. And that in itself kept me moving. Before I look up any questions, just a reminder, if you want any further support, any further content, do take a look at Supporting Champions podcast. blogs and articles on supportingchampions.co.uk, or potentially how to support a champion, and describe a little bit more about the origin of some of the performance questions for my PhD in chapter 2 there. And if you are interested in any of our courses, graduate courses or applied professional courses, we've got an offer at the moment for graduate courses, so 66% off all of those courses. Now is probably a good time for some questions, so I'm going to come out of this. I'm going to come out of this, and I'm going to just pop up the YouTube screen to see if there's any questions. Very happy to answer any questions tonight. Dance Mama, hello Lucy. All good, Steve. Right. Hi Chris, all good. Will this be available as a recording post-event, please? JHT Performance Nutrition. So yes, you'll get a link in the next day or so. Some tips on that will give you the playback. That'll be available for probably about 10 days, and then it'll move into our community platform. That's where you can replay all of our webinars, previous sessions, development sessions. What would be some good examples? Advanced team working skills, how to negotiate a salary, how to gain buy-in, how to do a needs analysis, and the how-to guides that go alongside it. So yes, for a period of time, JHT Performance Nutrition. Tom, if you could flip this scenario with regards to working alongside a full-time PhD, would you apply the same principles, but in terms of work that complements the PhD / final outcome? If you could flip this scenario with regards to working alongside a full-time PhD. Yeah, I think you could, Tom. I think it's a reasonable question. I think potentially my experience of supervising full-time PhDs and my experience of supervising part-time PhDs, there's probably greater capacity to make the PhD efficient, because I do see people tending to be a little bit less professional than they could be in terms of their study and how they're moving things forward. And so wanting things on a plate as opposed to creating goals, creating momentum, creating objectives for themselves so that they can work effectively. So, but equally what you could do is contain the work alongside that full-time PhD. It's a good question from the point of view that some people say, look, I can't, this, for example, people who can't afford to do volunteer-based work experience. And I certainly will sympathise with that. We have a scholarship program, for example, on our website. At the bottom of our online courses, we provide scholarship support for people who can't afford them, for example. But I would say that if you were working, or you want to get to a place where you can apply for applied jobs, full-time applied jobs, but you want to keep nudging forward that applied experience, if you did an hour a night at a rugby club doing their nutrition, or doing performance analysis for an hour for a hockey team, if you're nudging that forward, then it's nice and condensed. And I think that should, although I'm quite a considerate CV reviewer, that should speak to you being efficient and trying to move that forward. So you're starting to show greater commitment to that. I do often see people who are doing, I'm doing a clinical PhD or it's health related, but I want to work in sports performance, but I can't now. Well, I think you can actually. You can take the principles and apply them across, but you have to do some extra work there. Amazing. Thank you, Tom. Dance Mama, so that is Lucy. Thanks, Steve. So affirming of the approach I have. I'm doing 5 years part-time, but as you know, I'm running my own organisation, a family of 2 children. So brilliant to hear your process. So Lucy, this was an interesting one because I started my PhD in 2000 and I finished it in 2003. My eldest daughter was born in the autumn of 2003, and I thought, I am not going to try to do a PhD whilst I've got a newborn. And so it was one of those sort of an artificial but real practical goal. I wanted to get it done within that time. So before Rach got too pregnant, etc., etc. And so, that's something in itself of just thinking for you, Lucy, how could you find 5 minutes to write? And it could be over 5 years, rather than 165 words, you've got to write 25. And so that same principle of just keeping it moving. And the interesting thing about keeping it moving is that if I just did 5 minutes, then for the rest of the day, I'd be thinking, oh, yeah, there's that. Oh, yeah, I could think about doing that too. And I'd make a little note about picking that up, picking these ideas up. So time on task is important, but time off task is also important. But if as soon as I stopped doing that writing every day, I'd forget about it. I'd sort of worry about it. It's in the background. So keep going, Lucy. Alex, hi Steve, great presentation. Could I ask for your thoughts on the by publication route to PhD and comparisons to the traditional route? Thanks. I mean, I don't have a particular strong stance other than the fact that you can, and you can do a professional doctorate rather than the traditional thesis-based study of a particular topic that narrows and narrows and narrows with a training study at the end of it, for example. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's any strengths or weaknesses by that. I actually chose to publish one paper, and I got a bit of grief for this in the PhD. I say grief. I got a question. You should have published more by the time you've got to Viva. The other 4 studies I didn't publish. So the other 3 studies I didn't publish during the time of my PhD. But I was very clear about that in my PhD, that this had to be the process in which I could collect the data, but also complete. So I had an alternative, which was I can either take a lot longer or I can publish afterwards. And that was just a constructive conversation in Viva. You should have published a little bit more by now, and I explained, and it was fine. So certainly by publication route, the only thing there, a little bit like ethics, again, some people take 3 years to get their ethics back, so I can't control that. I can tell you a bit about studying and getting some support that way. But the only thing there is that you might be on reviewer timescales, you might be on publication journal timescales to be able to actually get this through. So, but I think actually, if you've got, if you're thinking about how this can advance my career, great. If you've got great publications, and if you've got starting to develop a reputation publicly, then that's certainly going to help you. Dance Mama again. I have spent the first year with imposter syndrome. It's been 20 years out of academia. Thankfully, I have persevered as my PhD is work-driven. Did you experience this at any point? Imposter syndrome. I think I perhaps did a little bit at conferences, Lucy. Not necessarily. I had a very considerate PhD supervisor who was actually in the year above me when I was doing my studies, but I had got the sort of 3 or 4 years of applied experience, and I was one of her first students. So she was sort of that sort of vicarious level of someone who could support me, who's just been through it, could sort of go, do this, just do that, just do this, and decode a lot of the process for me. So when I was going into it and thinking, oh, I don't know where to start, or what does this need to look like, then I had somebody I could lean on, and I'd advise you to be, seeking that sort of support early on. I did a little bit at having imposter syndrome around conference publications because I was an applied scientist working with several Olympic teams. I wasn't necessarily the VO2 kinetics researcher that I'm alongside. So I think if you can prepare a little bit more for those areas that you're feeling a little bit doubtful for, then I'd encourage you to go down that road. The other thing is about imposter syndrome. Kind of everybody's got it. Everybody's been through this process. It's just in academia, generally, there's a little bit of snobbery about feeling a bit vulnerable and not sure that you know something. And so if you don't know, then it sort of should be chastised a little bit. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. there's a little bit of academic snobbery if your knowledge levels aren't as high. And so finding somebody that you can genuinely support you, I think is really helpful. Alex, what are your thoughts on utilising pre-existing data? Sounds like you did it effectively as part of your thesis. I mean, Alex, if you've got access to some, do it. Do it. Setting up studies, finding participants, going through some sort of testing process, then analysing the data, and then potentially doing some reports afterwards. I mean, it saves you all of that pre-work. So if you've got it, you just need to make sure that you're writing it appropriately into your ethics submission, that you are that you're declaring that in your research studies, and so, for example, mine was creating a model of rowing performance, and so what I had to do was I had to find rowing physiology tests that occurred at the same time as rowing ergometer tests. And so that meant I had to set a 4-week window. So I was looking at this amazing data, but then an ergo test wasn't aligned to it. So I was having to reject that. So it was a sifting process in itself, because ultimately this process can save you time, but you shouldn't let up on the quality of your work. And so I could have just gone, I've got 2,000 rowers, let's analyse all of that. Well, actually, I want quality information that I can get a good answer that can help the sport. So, yes, use it effectively if you can. And it might be that just simply tidying up a normal process. And I've just seen this recently in a football club. They're collecting data, but they're not recording it well. They're not recording it, aligning it with other metrics. And so actually that's something you could probably do. Just tidying that data up means that that data gets collected. That means that in a year's time, you've got a data set. And so piggybacking, jumping on an existing project already, I think that can definitely help you. Dance Mama, apologies for the typo. Alex Brill, thanks for replying. A great idea for a live cast. Dance Mama, thanks. All right, any more questions before I kind of close out? Anyone got any more before I stop today? Other than to say, you know what, I genuinely think this is possible, and it's quite exciting. There's certainly, when I was doing this, there were times when I found motivation hard, but actually there were other times when I thought, you know what, I am working away at this, and this has got momentum. And for those people that were studying full time, I could see that I was keeping pace with people, even though it was spare time. So there's something quite wonderful about creating that momentum and that will, if you can be meticulous in creating that type of relationship with your supervisors and getting writing every day. Look, folks, I hope that's been useful for you. I can't see any more questions now, so I'm going to say a wonderful evening to you, and thanks so much for dialing in. Best of luck in your studies, and absolutely go for it. Take care now.